everyone who put this together inviting me here.
They had a certain something.
What would you say?
I knew the minute I saw Dave, he was going places.
They chased one goal relentlessly.
He just really had a clear idea of what he wanted. He loved music and wanted that for himself. Wanted that in his future.
Through struggles,
his headmaster told him he was certainly not going to earn a living in music.
And setbacks.
There was a horrible, horrible, horrible incident.
I remember there was a sign up on the door, due to a family emergency, Dave Matthews Band won't be playing tonight.
Some people are just driven. A soulful songwriter's defiant pursuit of superstardom.
He would get cortisone shots in his neck just so he could go out and take the stage.
Never before seen images, stories, and revelations from the people who know what really happened.
Dave was thinking in the back of his mind, I want to have a band. I want that guy.
Because they lived it with him.
He just looked at me and he's like, we're going to do this.
This is Driven, Dave Matthews.
Dave was born David John Matthews on the 9th of January 1967 in Johannesburg, South Africa. Dave's father and mother are John and Val. The eldest in the family was Peter, and then came Anne, then Dave, and the rudder, the tiller of the entire family was Jay.
They were a very tight family, and a very close family, and a very warm family.
Around the time David was born, it was sort of hardcore apartheid South Africa.
There was an inhumanity within the whole society towards black people.
Massive segregation, massive racism, everything as bad as it can literally get it, and it just got worse.
People of different racial origins could not live together. If they cohabited, it was a criminal offense.
There was no doubt that what was happening in South Africa was absolutely insane. David's family were Quakers, and Quakers in South Africa were traditionally very liberal.
Quakers, generally speaking, are pacifistic, don't believe that violence is a solution to anything.
And that often conflicted with the rest of South African society.
When Dave was 2, the family left South Africa for Yorktown Heights in the United States.
Yorktown Heights, the town where we lived, was very desolate, very wooded, very country. Not an awful lot going on.
Val and John wanted their kids to have a broader sense of what the world was like, the experience of going to public schools in America and mixing with a more diverse bunch of people.
And there was an opportunity for them to have a good life.
David's home life was very bohemian. There was just a lot of happy vibes in the household.
They were very musical as a family.
You wake up and there's classical music blaring on a Sunday morning.
I remember times his sister Jane and Dave would be sitting side by side on the piano bench, just plucking away at the piano. Dave was definitely a Beatles fan. Dave's father had a complete collection of everything the Beatles had put on vinyl.
I think David liked the complexity of the music and was quite fascinated by all the personalities in the band.
In fact, I remember one idea that he had was he was going to take images of the Beatles and have them transferred onto tiles and go door to door in his neighborhood and sell them. Dave was an interesting kid, to say the least.
David was always a performer, whether it was a stand-up comic at home or with his friends.
He used to just go in, all guns blazing, which was great to watch.
I wouldn't have called him hyperactive. He was dangerously close to being hyperactive.
Being at the Matthews house was definitely an interesting experience every time. And mostly, I think, to Val's credit.
She celebrated the delight that obviously Dave took in music and in art. Val knew how important art could be in a person's ability to express himself. And she tried to support him in having that confidence to stand alone and to be different.
David and his mother had a very strong bond. It was a good relationship. When he needed a shoulder, she was there. John Matthews, Dave's father, was a physicist, worked at IBM at the time.
David's father, John, was hugely important in young Dave's life.
The family spent a lot of time with each other. It seemed like when you went to visit the Matthews house, you got all of the Matthews. You didn't just get one of them.
Dave was 8 when his father's health began to deteriorate.
It was evident that he wasn't doing very well.
John was not 100%. And then there was the diagnosis. David's father was diagnosed having Hodgkin's disease, a lymphatic cancer that started the lymph system that went into his lungs. And John didn't want to have his lung removed. He felt that would be the termination of it, and indeed it's what it was.
Dave was about 10 years old when his father, John, died.
He was very close to his father.
There's no doubt about it. It's traumatic.
It's a young age, 10 years old to lose a father. To lose a friend or any family member, but a father especially, I think.
There's no doubt that his absence was enormously felt in the family.
Dave was, being the little man and just sort of toughing it out and dealing with it.
He had to be brave and not actually articulate his grief. That doesn't allow that grief to go away.
I do remember moments, when we would be playing together, he would all of a sudden just want to be sitting quietly and drawing. He did a lot of that.
The impact on young Dave, I think, must have been extraordinary.
It all comes down to nothing.
Next, Dave struggles to find his place.
Dave wasn't the cooperative, conforming boy.
We all thought that David was a little bit lost, and those that were close to him were concerned about what the hell he was going to do with the rest of his life.
After his father's death, there was a little change of Dave's habits. It's a tough thing to have a parent be absent.
There was suffering, but because there was that suffering, there was a strengthening that took place. Val was very resourceful, very strong, and that strength permeated into the children.
What Dave was able to do was express himself and to release that through a good outlet like music. Dave had begun playing the guitar.
Guitar lessons were very important and not to be forgotten about. He could miss a day's school, that was easy, but he would not miss a guitar lesson. Several years after John's death, Val and the children returned to South Africa.
She was looking for support, to have people around her that she knew, that she loved. The Matthews family were all centered around Johannesburg, so it seemed like a good thing to do for the family.
It would have been very tough for all of them without their family.
In the 80s, when David came back to South Africa, there was an enormous amount of civil unrest. The country was literally on the brink of civil war.
The black youth was expressing itself more vehemently and more clearly than it had previously.
David talked about the kind of craziness that was happening in South Africa. He found it quite difficult to cope with and very different from what he'd been used to.
He was completely colorblind.
He's looking at people as people rather than black people and white people.
David's family lived in the northern suburbs of Johannesburg. They were anything other than white families living in those suburbs.
La, 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 la.
The white suburbs in South Africa were kept very isolated from the chaos that was happening in the black townships.
Dave was aware of the huge gap between the haves, which were the whites, and the have-nots, which were anything other than white. And he was determined not to fall victim of that prejudice.
The first school that David went to when he came back to South Africa was a school called St. Stithians College.
It was not a liberal education like the one that he'd enjoyed in the United States.
Very stuffy, all boys. It was very focused on academics and sport.
It was a fairly elite school based on an English public school system. You had to wear these khaki shorts with a khaki shirt tucked into them with your socks pulled up to your knees. You looked like a bloody idiot.
It was a real classical private school, and you know, you couldn't put a foot wrong because they used to beat you if you did.
Dave wasn't the cooperative, conforming boy. What set him on fire was his music and art.
St. Stithians didn't favour the arts very much.
His headmaster at St. Stithians told him that he'd better put himself together. He was certainly not going to earn a living in music. Val decided that he would be better served in a different environment.
When David was about 16, he left St. Stithians College.
He wanted to find more of an outlet for his art.
He was accepted at the Johannesburg School of Art, Ballet and Music, which he was thrilled about.
David's artistic abilities were drawing and painting.
David did do an amazing shot of the Beatles. It is one of the nicest sketches I've ever seen.
Art schools are very rigid structures.
I don't know whether it's the environment that Dave was particularly looking for.
He didn't like to be told what to draw and how to draw it. He came up with his own drawings and didn't like to conform to the whole, this is how it's done. So he transferred and went to Damlin College in the centre of Johannesburg. That was purely academic. It was just get him in, teach him quick and get him out.
The environment that he was used to out of school was quite a liberal environment. Graham and David and I were typical teenagers.
We did spend a lot of time in shopping malls,
at each other's houses,
and video arcades.
Breaking the law, breaking the law.
We'd cause as much trouble as we possibly could without really getting into trouble.
And then at night we used to do a lot of clubs. Gay clubs were the cool clubs to go to. There were gay nights and then there were straight nights, so we used to go on the straight nights. There's a lot of high energy which David couldn't bear. He hated it, but he liked it. He liked getting out and scoping the chicks.
I can remember spending days with David and Graham listening to music. David listened to Cat Stevens an enormous amount. I remember him playing guitar to Father and Son.
He was very, very talented on guitar, and he was absolutely passionate about it.
We just couldn't believe what he was doing. We're like, how the hell did you make a guitar change like that? Where did you get that chord from?
He was a natural performer.
David left South Africa as soon as he finished high school. He wanted to do something different.
He wanted to just go and explore the world and do whatever he had to do.
We decided to travel around Europe, stay in hostels and cheap places. If he knew how to do one thing, he could play music. So we tried to see if we can make some money on the streets of Amsterdam.
I'm in place to ride the wire. I'll come back again.
I remember David playing the song that Jane likes on the streets of Amsterdam in January, and it being absolutely freezing.
Would you like to play?
Everybody was walking by and nobody giving us any money at all.
And I'll be back around again.
He ran out of cash, so David left Amsterdam just before Jonathan and I left.
We all thought that David was a little bit lost, and those that were close to him were concerned about what the hell he was going to do with the rest of his life.
He had spent 2 years bumming around, discovering himself. You know, enough was enough.
Next, Dave lands in Virginia and takes the stage.
You have this in that car? There's no way.
but has trouble finding his true voice.
He was writing songs, but no one really knew about it. He told me he was scared to show them to anybody.
Log on to VH1.com to see rare photos and footage of Dave Matthews, and check out early photos and footage of all Driven artists.
We were traveling around Europe and David ran out of money. He just didn't really know what he wanted to do. His family had moved to Charlottesville and that seemed like the obvious place to go.
Dave came to Charlottesville in 1989.
Charlottesville is the kind of place that could hold the interest of somebody with some creative energy.
Oh, when I step into the light.
There's an incredible wealth of talent here, whether it's novelists or researchers or musicians.
A lot of diversity, a lot of appreciation of diversity.
The first time I saw him, I remember he had on African clothes, these orange and yellow sort of puff pants and shirts.
It was his look, man. He loved it. Crazy colors with other crazy colors, all kinds of little necklaces.
It was just this incredible carnivalesque character. I remember just wondering, who the hell is that?
He was the bartender at Miller's, which is a famous place for musicians and artists of all kinds to hang out.
They had jazz shows there almost every night of the week.
Very dark, very smoky.
It was an incredible social scene. Everyone's walking in, shooting the crap, talking, you know, drinking beers, hanging out, and he fit right into the middle of that.
He was the bartender, and he brought a good vibe when he was there.
You just couldn't wait to get to that bar, you know, and sit there and rap to Dave.
Dave is a storyteller. It's an awesome skill.
Dave was a little bit like Dylan Thomas, the poet, who was famous for just having this endless flow of repartee and wordplay and eloquence. And that was Dave.
There were so many late nights hanging out after hours at Miller's.
All the employees from one place or other would gather and drink till dawn.
Very slacker-like.
There was a lot of 20 and 30-somethings that really still wanted to do something in the arts.
The music scene and the arts have always been really powerful in this town.
There was something happening just about every place. You had offstage theater, and you had the Live Arts Theater Ensemble, which was doing a lot of really interesting plays.
David appeared in one or more of the coffee houses that were put on at Live Arts.
The coffee house was kind of like a live Saturday Night Live-ish kind of skit thing.
So how'd you like that car?
In Just Say No, David plays a sales manager in a used car lot.
Did you know anything about that? This is a piece of paper that somebody stuck in the wrong car.
He was really, really an effective actor.
Previously used as a rental vehicle.
What? You found this in that car? There's no way.
David's routine was acting, working at Miller's, and still playing music. I don't think David ever stopped playing music.
He was writing songs, but no one really knew about it. He told me he was scared to show them to anybody.
I would like to reach out my hand.
It was odd that, you know, for a long time I knew him and didn't really know that he had musical aspirations.
There were other musicians in Charlottesville that had been performing for years and that were part of the scene and part of the music establishment.
Tim Reynolds is one of those Charlottesville musical characters that just has been around for a long time.
David got to meet Tim and was always amazed at how talented and what kind of things Tim could do.
He would just play guitar and just not give a damn what anybody thought.
Tim influenced Dave greatly because that's something Dave wanted to do, and Tim was sort of like his mentor.
Tim comes up to me and says, "Oh, we're going to have this guy sing with us. And, you know, can you set up an extra microphone?" And I didn't know, you know, what was going on.
It was a really quiet night at Miller's on a Monday evening.
And all of a sudden, here comes Dave, and he's going to get up on stage and sing. And I thought, wow, that's wild. He started playing. Hair stood up in the back of my neck.
This wasn't just some person doing, you know, a Neil Young cover for the 173rd time. I mean, this was for real.
House is doomed, and lost her mind.
I remember just being struck how wildly original that was. I'd never seen anybody play and sing along with themselves like that, and just knowing, again, that he had something extraordinary. Through Tim, Dave was able to overcome that original shyness.
He finally got up the courage to show people the songs that he had written.
I had started an open mic night. He was right off the bat one of the people participating.
He just had this presence on the stage that people really gravitated to.
There's not all that to do.
A lot of people sat up and took notice and thought, this guy can sing.
And I'm gonna leave it the world until I'm 6 feet up the ground in my grave.
He was so full of energy and so full of charisma and so great as a person that he was able to enlist all these people to help him out.
A friend of ours, a guy named Ross Hoffman, he knew when he heard Dave, like so many other people back then, that he was really hearing something special. Ross knew that I had a studio set up, and he brought Dave over to my house to do a demo.
Hey, my friend, it seems your eyes are troubled, care to share your time with me.
There were 4 songs, the best of what's around, the song that Jane likes, I'll Back You Up, and recently,
People stare and we just ignore. What's the use in hiding out?
Dave wrote all the music for those songs. He wrote the lyrics. The demo was done in October of '90.
The purpose for his demo was just to document the songs and hopefully have it be good enough that he'd get some gigs and just start to move forward with it.
He had, from the beginning, an idea of what he wanted. He loved music, just passionate about music, and wanted that for himself. Wanted that in his future.
He just sort of said, I really want to do this, I'm going to do this. The first words out of my mouth, you should get a band.
What would you say?
Next, Dave Matthews Band hits the road.
We traveled in a 15-passenger van. It was just like god-awful, smelly, feed and ass and rotten food.
Then, tragedy strikes again.
I remember there was a sign up on the door that said, you know, due to a family emergency, Dave Matthews Band won't be playing tonight.
David really seemed to be at home and at ease with an acoustic guitar in his hands.
He'd written, you know, a handful of songs.
He pretty much dedicated his life to it, and he was doing nothing else.
It was around the summer of 1991 that Dave began to assemble the band.
Dave spent many a night watching the local jazz musicians.
David really had a clear vision of how he wanted things to sound.
Dave was listening to all these players, thinking in the back of his mind, I want to have a band. I want that guy.
Carter was widely known as the best drummer in the area.
I've never seen anybody play the drums like that.
Leroy Moore is an incredible saxophone player.
He was playing swing, he was playing funk, he was playing fusion.
Stefan Lessard was a bass prodigy.
David saw all the potential that Stefan had.
He was like in 10th grade, I think, when he started. Boyd was a classically trained violinist and was sort of like a bit of a prodigy on the local scene.
And then there's Dave, and he's obviously the glue that brought everyone together.
The 5 guys are just all very different. They don't seem to add up.
None of them had played really in a straight-up rock band.
We just sort of ignored the fact that, boy, we've got like a violin, sax, acoustic guitar, you know, bass and drums, you know, playing rock music, and we just played and had fun.
Eastern Standard was, I think, the first place that they ever really played on any kind of regular basis.
We got like paid $50 a night and, you know, dinner and all you can drink.
The audience was growing and growing and growing and talking about them.
Is this gradual? Is this band playing? What band is it? It's that band Dave Matthews put together.
The bartender at Miller's. You know Dave Matthews. His band. He got a band? Oh, yes.
We kept it as that, the Dave Matthews Band.
It was about 1992. Now we're really starting to take off.
There was a big buzz about Dave's band.
Dave Matthews Band is a powerful, intense, sprawling talent, but it also takes the right kind of nurturing and professional guidance.
Corn Capshaw was a club owner.
He was the main music man in Charlottesville.
Corn just heard about him and saw him at Miller's a couple times and then booked him to play at Trax.
Trax was the club in Charlottesville. It was, you know, the big rock club. That was where the national acts came through.
If you play Trax in Charlottesville, you're doing really well.
Those gigs were awesome. Everybody was just sort of just getting off on just like this new sound.
There were songs that he'd sing, like two-step, where you would think that the floor was going to cave in because people were jumping up and down so much.
To see a local band go in there on a Tuesday night and do that, and then to do it every week was pretty astounding.
There was just an energy about them, and there was something about David. I mean, you could just see him on the stage.
I thought he was incredible. I knew the minute I saw him perform that he was going places.
You're watching a star being born.
Corn said, basically, guys, this is what you need to do. You need to play every single club in every town all across America.
Trucking, got my chips cashed in, keep trucking.
Corn was a big Grateful Dead fan. He saw many shows and was familiar with how that organization worked.
The live show was the most important thing.
We're on the road for like 10 months out of the year.
You're playing like 6 nights in a row, and there's a 300-mile drive between each city.
We traveled in a 15-passenger van.
You're talking about, you know, a nasty, you know, van bench, you know, with a bunch of other grumpy, you know, smelly guys.
Just like all of us packed in there, it was just like god-awful, smelly, feed and ass and rotten food and God knows what.
But they all wanted to do it. They all wanted to work hard. They all wanted to make it. Dave Matthews Band would play every place that would possibly have them. It was fraternities, it was clubs, parking lots, backyards. It was not always an easy task to get through a show. There were times when Dave was just exhausted. His throat would just be so raw he could hardly speak, you know, and he would get cortisone shots in his neck just so he could go out and take the stage that night. Dave did his fair share of keeping everyone, including the crew, going.
I remember one time we were playing like 2 gigs in a day, and Dave could see that I was pretty weary at that time, you know, but I remember he just stopped me in the middle of the street and he just looked at me and he was like, we're gonna do this.
Everybody worked hard to spread the word and get people involved, but it all came down to those guys going on stage every night. They just blew people away.
All the while, you know, they had people recording shows, and those shows were being traded on cassette tapes. It was something that the Grateful Dead made famous.
David's take on the taping policy was let the music get out there and share it.
They would go to colleges the first time, and the kids would be singing along, and they'd never even been there before.
Everyone knew every word to every song, and they hadn't released any material.
It was a real grassroots movement.
I want to thank you all here in Virginia for spreading the word about us and for helping us out.
We just built crowds just like one place at a time. It was very much a word-of-mouth kind of thing.
It was like that old shampoo commercial where they told two friends and they told two friends, and it just went like that.
The fans were like generating the stuff for us. The only thing we had to do was just play, and they took care of the rest.
An intern of mine who went to Colgate University kept hassling me that he had this tape he wanted me to hear. And from the moment it came out of the speakers, it felt like something different. So I immediately reacted and called a colleague of mine in New York, Pete Robinson.
Bruce Floor had called me up and goes, "Hey, you ever hear this guy Dave Matthews Band?"
I said, "He's playing in New York. We should go check it out."
There was like 400, 500 kids there. The place was packed. The music was great. The band was great on stage. David was great. It was kind of, it gave you goosebumps. It was amazing.
I mean, this is in the period of Nirvana and Pearl Jam and Soundgarden. And here was this rock band on stage without an electric guitar, playing music more powerful than any of those bands I've mentioned. Then it was a matter of, how do we make this ours?
RCA came on really strong.
It was not an immediate love fest. The Dave Matthews Band and management was very standoffish.
Dave was a little bit nervous about signing a record deal. Their strategy was always, we'll do everything that we can to keep it within our family.
So what we set out to do is try to capture the band and take a really good picture of what they did live. And that's when we set out to do Remember Two Things.
It just made more sense to recording an independent album.
The idea was to build something for themselves that would last, not just sign away to a label and be like, okay, here's my publishing rights.
Hey! Bruce Floor and Pete Robinson were determined to get them on RCA.
We'd go to see them out on the road, and we actually got to know them, and that helped us a lot.
This was a 7-month process. And when we came and put our deal on the table and our vision on the table, it was really, you lead, we follow.
It would have been foolish for any label to have come in and dramatically change what they were doing.
And I think that was one of the linchpins of the band deciding to sign with RCA.
It never felt like we were signing over our future to this label. I remember Dave always used to talk about it's just longer arms for us to use.
It wasn't until November of '93 until they actually signed. It was a pretty great day. Remember Two Things was released on the night that they signed with RCA.
All these kids were lined up to have the record autograph.
It turned into a mob scene.
It was an amazing moment, the night the band signed their record contract.
David was excited in the fact that they'd signed with a major label. RCA had been Elvis's label, and it was an enormous step.
It was just his realization that we had sort of created something.
Dave Matthews Band was in Boulder when the tour manager got a phone call.
There was a horrible, horrible, horrible incident.
Dave was on a plane pretty soon thereafter.
I remember
there was a sign up on the door that said, due to a family emergency, Dave Matthews Band won't be playing tonight.
I'll go on forever only knowing I'll see you again.
Anne tragically died in South Africa, and her husband also tragically died.
David was really, obviously, completely devastated at the death of his sister.
It had an enormous impact on everyone.
Dave handled it in a very private fashion.
He's had his own set of personal tragedies, but he's got a strength of purpose and an understanding of what life is.
He had converted the suffering part of his life into a positive, and it gave him greater determination than he had before.
When you're not here, that song around my head.
Next, Dave takes to the studio and bounces back.
We were singing all different notes there, weren't we?
I think every record is cathartic in its own way. And Under the Table and Dreaming, that was a good thing for Dave.
It's his little way of saying goodbye.
Dave's sister died under tragic circumstances. that affected Dave greatly.
I got in this morning. I was in South Africa. That's a country full of lots of violence and lots of hatred, but it's also full of lots of love and lots of good people. But I was there mourning the very recent murder of my sister. So this evening goes out to her and in her memory.
Grief is something that you can't avoid. It doesn't go away. It might disappear for a little while, but it's still there. It somehow needs to be lived through.
Then I'd let you go.
David was ready to do something new, to record and be in a studio.
In the summer of 1994, Dave Matthews Band was recording Under the Table and Dreaming.
I think every record is cathartic in its own way. And Under the Table and Dreaming, that was a good thing for Dave.
Under the Table and Dreaming was dedicated to Anne, just his little way of saying goodbye or whatever he did to make him feel better.
He was incredibly energized by it and simply believed in what he was doing. The whole band did.
Nobody had any doubts that the record wasn't going to be great because the songs were already road tested for years.
All those songs that I had heard them play live and I'd heard them change and finally could just lay them down, you know, the right version.
David never wanted to compromise the integrity of the music. Sometimes we'd have to do an edit for radio. And David said, listen, if you want to do an edit for radio, I'm cool with that. But for the album, if you edit that solo, he said, I'll kill you.
The man is an artist. He's a poet. He truly is. Those people do not pull their punches.
Dave Matthews definitely expresses his emotions through his music.
He writes really complex songs about deep issues that sneak up on you. When you actually stop and think about the lyrics, it's like, you know, wow, that's about death. Well, that's a really cheery song about death.
He has a message inherent in his music that there's hope. That's what I love about him.
Under the Table and Dreaming, when it was released, debuted at number 34 on the Billboard charts.
Coming out of the box, it made some noise.
But was it a complete slam dunk at mainstream radio? No, I don't think so. I think Dave Matthews Band was still under the radar.
The band made us keep our foot only half on the gas pedal. There was no video right out of the box. There was not a big picture of Dave and the band.
It wasn't like some people sitting behind the desk in New York and LA saying, oh, what are we going to do with these kids? Let's dress them in this outfit and let's have them dance and do this. You know, it wasn't that.
It was like, leave the air of mystery about it and leave it about the music, not about the imaging, not about the marketing.
It was really the five of us, you know, saying, you know, let's play these songs and let's play them like there's no tomorrow, you know.
They were playing bigger and bigger venues, and they were getting more and more press.
Because we could get to a place and pack the room, that's why the media came to us.
Just kept building and building. You know, everyone just got on board, you know, because it was just one of those things where how could you deny this?
Thank y'all very much to see you. Bye-bye.
There was a focus to keep your eye on the ball and don't get caught up in the whole, you know, wow, we're becoming rock stars. The band decided, let's go make another great record.
Shortly after the release of Under the Table and Dreaming, the band went into the studio to record Crash.
We were singing all different notes there, weren't we?
We knew we had the bulk of a great record. Once again, a lot of songs that had been played for a while in concert.
So much to say, so much to say, so much to say, so much to say.
So Much to Say was one of those songs that we always wanted to record, and I was very, very excited when we did record it. It did come out so well.
But the new songs that came out of that session were also encouraging. Crash Into Me was written in the studio.
I remember Bruce and I being very excited about that song and going, oh man, that song is just, it's amazing.
His girlfriend at the time, now his wife, Ashley, would visit every now and again, and when she'd leave, he'd just be all broken up, and he would just kind kind of like pour out these tunes, and that's where Crash came from.
You got your ball, you got your chain tied to me, tie me up again.
There's certain songs that feel like they came straight out of someone's soul, just right onto the paper and then right through the voice, and I think that's one of them.
Lost for you, I'm so lost for you.
There was no way that song was not going to be a hit. It was that good.
Come crash into me.
Crash was released in April of 1996.
There was no sophomore slump. Crash just blew out.
Crash debuted at #2 on the Billboard charts.
That was really when the band started to really take off on the mainstream.
They had hit songs on the radio, and pretty much everyone knew their name.
At that point, you knew this band was everywhere.
For Best Rock Performance by a Duo or Group, Grammy goes to the Dave Matthews Band for So Much to Say.
Yeah, so much to say.
For a touring band to come out and receive that attention and win an award was really exciting.
Everybody just sort of looking at each other, and then somebody slowly rose and we walked up to the stage to receive it.
Thank you all very much for this. I had no idea.
It was just wild, you know, that from the Eastern Standard and frat houses and all these things that we've been doing, all these hundreds and hundreds of gigs, and then here we are, we won a Grammy.
When you get to that level where like the Grammys start getting involved, it's a whole nother thing now, and you're being recognized by your peers and by the industry.
They just weren't a little band from Virginia anymore.
David has this quiet charisma. He has the ability to draw people in without trying, and he's very sincere.
Fame has done nothing to change the kind of person that he is, and that has so much to do with the family that he's from.
Dave has demonstrated the strength and the resolve that his father had, and I'm very saddened that his father has not had the pleasure of seeing Dave grow into a man.
He's had a lot of tragedy in his life, a lot of death, and he's had to deal with these things. And I think that a lot of what he is saying comes from his life experience.
You hear it in the songs, you hear it in the way he touches his guitar, everything about his music. It's just a deep, genuine thing.
He's not trying to be anything other than exactly who he is. So he just accepts all the different sides of himself, which is human.
It all comes from here with Dave, and you can't mess with that.
Chicken,